computer. Yes. All right. So, as I said, Ruby and JavaScript have a lot of similarities. In some cases, almost too many similarities. If they were more different, I wouldn't have as hard a time moving from one to the other. But a lot of companies still use Ruby on Rails. Matter of fact, some of the biggest companies here in Toronto, Shopify being the big one that I'm sure you've all heard of. They use Ruby on Rails for their whole application. I spoke with their CIO once. It was kind of interesting, and it was one of those. I met him at a gathering, and I didn't realize how cool this guy was when I met him. I only knew how cool he was after the fact. So, all right. So we're going to be learning Ruby. Ruby has a different way of approaching things. First, the good news. For those of you who got stuck or had problems understanding async code, the beauty is Ruby has no async. Everything is synchronous. So everything just happens one after the other, after the other, after the other. It's up to you to make sure that that code isn't blocking anything going on. But at least at the beginning, you don't have to worry about async await or anything like that. Ruby has a philosophy, which is kind of interesting. And that is that Mats, who's the guy who made Ruby, Mats is nice, so Ruby is nice. I know that sounds kind of cheesy and new agey, but yeah, they definitely go in for that. So when you are learning a new language, it's important to go to the right sources to get the information. And the information you want is at rubydoc.org. This is a great site and gives you a lot of very good information. Another really great site and more fun is a quick and hopefully painless ride through Ruby with cartoon foxes. And it's how to learn Ruby in cartoons. I read this and it's actually a lot of fun. If you're a visual learner, this is great. And this book is kind of the almost the Bible of Ruby. So, and I'm not suggesting that anybody needs to go out and buy it. I believe the whole text of this is online, and you can read it on the web if you want. This is the book that I got when I started learning Ruby, and I got it because there was a ninja on the cover. It turns out it was a pretty good book. Don't let the page count of 886 pages set you off. You don't need to know most of that. Ruby is very, very complete. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of methods, there are a lot of classes, and many more than there are in JavaScript. And we only scratch the surface of JavaScript. All right, let me see, what else do I want to start with? I want to start with, right. Oh yes, remember when we said in JavaScript, everything is kind of an object? But that's not quite true because they're primitives. One, numbers aren't objects, strings aren't objects. In Ruby, everything is an object, and I mean everything. Numbers are objects, strings are objects. The concept of undefined, which is called nil in Ruby, is an object. And goes without saying, Ruby's perfect for object-oriented programming. So we're going to learn Ruby, and the reason we're learning is for Ruby on Rails. So Ruby on Rails became a thing, and a lot of people think that they are inextricably linked, like Ruby and Rails came out at the same time. Actually, Ruby was out for 10 years before Rails came out. And Ruby on Rails is actually a framework where you can set up and run very complicated frameworks very quickly. So in Express, where we got everything working in like 3 or 4 files, Ruby on Rails, even a base Ruby on Rails installation, has a lot of files, and there's a lot of what they term magic with Rails. Things just work, and you're not exactly sure why they're working, but it's convention. They go for convention. So if you put a file in a certain place, it will behave in a certain manner, which is not how JavaScript works at all. All right, so let's get started with the basics. All right, so let me open a new here. Okay, so let me just go and just easier to do it that way. All right, so starting off fresh with nothing in here. So let's start off with, I'm just going to say 1 dash variables RB. Okay. So like Node, we run Ruby programs in the terminal. And if you have it installed, I'm assuming most of you, if not all of you, do at this point. Let me know if I'm wrong, by the way. But all we need to do is we need to run Ruby and then the name of the file. Now, there's nothing in that file, so let's change that. Let us start off with the most basic of things, which is a string or a variable. So we can create variables. We don't need to worry about using a keyword like const or let. We just give it a, we just call it something. So I'm going to say name equals John. All right. So that is how I specify a variable. And if I want to see the variable, I could say puts name. Okay. So you can see the syntax is very clean. It's very easy to read. Well, at least this small bit. So let's have a look. Maybe 1. So 1. Oh, come on. Perfect. All right. That was exciting. I don't know if exciting is the word. In Ruby, we like to use what we call snake case for variable names. So instead of last name, which is how I would do it in JavaScript, we do last underscore name. And there we go. So let me see what else. Puts, yes. So puts is sort of like the console.log of Ruby. There are also a couple of other things we can do. Rather than puts, we can also do print. Which is almost the same. And you'll notice that there's that little non-visible text entity, so that percentage sign. And that is what's included with print. So that shows the end of the line. So generally, instead of print, we put puts. And then another very popular method here is P. And P, again, works slightly differently in that it returns the actual string. So with the quotes around it. So puts gives you what the return value. The P gives you the return value with what type it is in this case. All right. So let's do some fun things with my name. So I'm going to say puts name plus last name. Oh, so concatenation works the same way as it does in JavaScript. We can also do interpolation. And we actually do that by doing it's there we go. So far, so good. So notice I'm not using backticks. These are just regular quotes, double quotes in this case. I believe the same rules for quotes works in Ruby as it does in JavaScript. So single quotes and double quotes are equivalent, but you must use the same set. So if you start with a single quote, you have to end with a single quote. Let's see what else. All right, so remember when I said everything is an object? Well, it's true. My name is an object, but let's do something else. Let's put numbers, because you've seen my name a lot now. So let's put puts 7. Sure, 7's a lucky number. There we go. Let's do the same. Let's put 7. Now, how do we invoke a method on an object? With the dot. So I'm going to say dot to underscore s. That means to string. Save that. You're going to see the same thing because it looks the same. But if I instead put, let's change both of these to P, and we should see a difference. Yeah, so one is the number 7, the other is the string 7. We can also reverse that. So we can say 7 to S, and we could say P 7 dot to I, which means to integer. I think that will work. Yep. So I've reversed. There is no coercion in JavaScript, or in Ruby, I should say. JavaScript will just see if it can turn it into a number, if it needs a number, and just do it. Ruby doesn't do that. Ruby it insists that you're the one who has to decide what kind of data you're passing it. What else do we have? We also have Booleans here. So we'll do P true and true. Actually, let's, instead of true equals true, let's do 7.
Hey, John, do you mind making the font a little bigger?
Absolutely. It's a new computer, so the font might be is probably slightly different. Is that better?
Yeah, that seems good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You. I should have realized when I saw everybody like leaning in that that's what was going on. Okay. So yes, we have Booleans here in Ruby as well. We have strings and numbers. So they're the same primitive types, but again, everything is an object. So if I run true dot to underscore s, and then I say put or p, it will return to me the string true. And I'm going to change that back. Okay. So that is the basics. Are there any questions about how variables work?
Yeah, John, just a quick question. If we can go back to the what you were saying about the single versus double quotes.
Yeah.
I'm just testing it out on my end. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but
okay.
If correct me if I'm wrong, if we use the single quotes and variables, so if we're using interpolation, it seems to be printing out the result as a string.
Yes. Yes.
So it's doing it differently than if we're using double.
It is slightly different. I'm a little rusty. My Ruby's a little rusty, but yes, you are correct. So let's actually have a look at that.
Okay.
So let's no, thank you. Call me out if I tell you a lie. Not that I'll do it on purpose, but
just to be clear, I was just making sure that I didn't do anything wrong.
No. Let's make sure that we see what you see. Okay. So run it, and there, Michael comes back as the string. There you go. The more you know. Okay, so that's variables. Let's create another file, and I'm going to call this 2-. So, oh, and I probably should put .rb on the end. Okay. So before I actually get into conditionals, there's a couple of things I want to show you that is going to make your life a bit better. When you have Ruby installed, you can type IRB, and you are now in an interactive Ruby session. This is very much like the console in a web browser. So I can do the same sorts of things, 7.2_s, and it will return to me the string 7. That little arrow means returns. I When I'm doing my Ruby, I almost always have a terminal open to IRB so that I can check things out very quickly. Another thing, oh, and to get out of it is Control D and not Control C. One of those weird things. And the other thing is RI. So when you're installing gem files, which are very much like NPM packages, but except for Ruby, you're going to notice that it takes a while to install something called RI. What RI is documentation. So if I type RI2_S, I should get, here we go, information about how this works. So our argument, it takes an argument, it returns a string, and it gives you a bunch of information. And it's actually pretty complete. So this is actually another lifesaver. You want to be able to look at the documentation quickly. Sometimes I use RI, other times I'll go to the RubyDoc website. It just depends on if I want to see, something in a larger format than a small terminal window. All right, conditionals. Okay, so let's come over here and I'm going to set a variable. I'm going to create a number. I'm going to set it to 5. Okay, so I've got num is equal to 5. Oh, I forgot something in variables. Let me go back very quickly. When you create a variable lowercase like this, it's the same as creating a JavaScript variable with the let keyword. In other words, you can change the value of last name. So here I've got last name Barson. I can come down here and say last name equals myth, because I can't remember off the top of my head any of your last names. And then I could say P. No. There we go. And I can run that again. And you can see that Smith gets returned. However, there's another way to do this. If you want to create the equivalent of a constant, you can capitalize it. So let's create and the convention is to capitalize the entire variable name. In theory, you can just capitalize the very first letter. However, if you capitalize the entire thing, it's much easier to read because when you're skimming code, it's easy to miss one character. So I'm going to say yet another equals Joe. And then I'm going to try down here and yet another equals Bob. And so what happens if I do P yet another? So it does return. I do actually get the information. However, I also get an error. And you see here that I've already initialized a constant, yet another, and then it tells me where else so line 32, I've created yet another a second time. It was originally instantiated on line 9. So unlike JavaScript, which will just crash, this will let you do it, but it'll complain. I'm not sure if it's better or not, but it's just the way it is. All right, back to conditionals. So I've got this number, and this should look familiar. If 6 is greater than the number, I can puts bigger. All right. And let's run it on 2. Oh, yes, this is a block, and in a block in Ruby, it must end with a word end. Okay, so I've opened a block, and you could tell because VS Code handily indented it for me. So that's telling me I need to end the block. Otherwise, Ruby doesn't know where to go. And there we go. So if statements work the same way. Let me just look at this 6 is greater than num. So this greater than, you're thinking, well, if 6 is an object, is greater than an object as well. Not quite. Greater than is a method. The equivalent is actually 6 dot greater than, just like any other method. The name of this method is the greater than sign. So if I do is greater than 5, it will return to me with a true. There we go. So that is handy. But just so you're either an object or you're a method on an object. And that includes puts as well. Puts is a method on the kernel object, which is the base object for Ruby. Everything descends from it. All right. We can also use else statements. Let me just copy this. All right, and instead of putting my end here, I am going to put an else if. I don't know why they dropped the second E, maybe for efficiency, who knows? Who knows? So if I say 6 is less than the num, we can, I cannot type to save my life. Good thing I'm not paid to do this. Oh, wait. And let's change num here to, oh, hold on. I did the greater than twice. So let us put num equals 8. Right. And if I run that, there we go. It is smaller. And finally, we can just do an else statement. If I could spell else. So you can have as many else ifs as you want here in your chain, but you must have an end at the surprisingly end of your block of code. Okay. We also have some cool things that we can use. Let's do not raining right now. And while it was snowing, was it yesterday, day before? A little bit. It's not right now. It looks beautiful outside. So we can do puts, which is nice. Okay, but I can put a conditional on here. I could put it on the end. So instead of saying not equal, I can say unless. So I can run that. Same logical operators as you're familiar with in JavaScript work in Ruby. So double and, double pipe for and or. We can also do what we call short circuiting. So let's create we can then put and we can put it will look at this. If it's true, it will evaluate the second expression and return that expression. Okay. So conditionals are very similar, except for this weird unless. Okay, so unless is kind of new to us. We can also put if at the end, which you can do it either way. So if 6 is greater than num, or I could say puts by the way, Alt Shift F is your friend in VS Code for tidying up. All right, and run that. There we go. It really is bigger. Let me just look through all of my. So we can put our conditionals either in front or behind.
Hey, John, can I ask a quick question? Sorry for the interruption.
No, go for it.
So I understand that everything is kind of like an object in Ruby.
Yep.
If that is the case, like when there are two numbers, like 5 is greater than 6, like 5 dot, I guess.
Yep.
How can you compare two objects directly? Like we used.
Right. So that is actually an excellent question. So we can have a look at the greater than here. Let's see. So what this does, and you have to stop thinking about, oh, right, it's not gonna like that. All right, slash. There we go. Ha, I knew it. So this takes the value of the object because it knows it's operating on a number and it knows the value of the number. So instead of like blindly doing less or sorry, greater than, it actually knows how it's going to be used. It's going to be used comparing one object with another object. The person who's running that wants to know if one object is larger than the other object, the value of it. You know that a number is going to have one value.
Okay.
It has a lot of methods, but it has one value. So no, excellent question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. All right. Let me see what's next. Okay. So I think that's it for conditionals right now. So that means we get to start another file, and that is 3-loops. If you go back to JavaScript, everything is a loop, or almost everything seems to happen in a loop. And same is true in pretty much every programming language. So let's create a loop. So I'm going to set my loop. I'm going to set it equal to my initial value is going to equal to 0. And I could say loop. And I can use the do and the end keywords. So everything in the loop is everything between do and end. Okay. And I could do here, I can even do dot plus equals 1. So I'm going to increment it by 1. I'm going to say puts hello, actually got to be a string, hello plus I underscore to I dot to underscore s. You're going to get very good at using your underscore key when you're programming in Ruby. And I have to change the name of this. So I realized I am not getting any code help. There we go. Everything's nice and colored now. What's going to happen when I run this?
Infinite loop.
You got it, Pontiac. So shall we stress my new computer and see if I can crash it? The answer is yes. There is a finite number of resources in any computer. So I have to put an exit condition here. So let's put an exit condition. I'm going to say break if I is greater than, say, 100. Bread? I must be missing lunch. Break. So now I could also put that break afterwards. I just decided to put it in front of. Okay, so this is the most important thing, that I have a break somewhere in here. So let's run that. And what did I do? Loop do puts hello plus if I is greater than 10. Oh, unexpected equals. There we go. Oh, it doesn't like my plus equals. So I guess this is a case where I have to do it that way. There we go. So I just printed hello 100 times. So that's a loop. Now, obviously, this is the equivalent of a while loop in JavaScript. And while I tend to avoid using while loops in JavaScript, I also try and avoid using loop inside Ruby. So we can actually create loops in the way that we're familiar with. So let's create a students array. Let's create an array, and we will add TJ and Gottfried. IED, right? That's right, correct? Okay, good. Making sure. So again, an array is an array. It looks very similar to an array in JavaScript. So what do we do with arrays? Well, we go through it. So students dot each do. All right, here is where we would normally put an anonymous function. And we can do that. The equivalent here is to put that value inside pipes. We call those pipes. So we're going to say for each student, we're going to do something, and we'll just put and I also have to put an end at the end again. All right, so I'm going to just change this to 10 so I don't have crazy scrolling down here. Great, so hello TJ, hello Gottfried. So this is, each is the same as for each in JavaScript. We can go through an array and we can do something to each value in that array. We can also use a for loop. So we could say for student in students do, and once again, we put an end. So if you like for loops better than for each, you can do that. Also, we can take this, if you only have one line here, it's actually might be easier for you to do it in a slightly different way. And that is for student in students, and say that inside. This should work. So let's try that. Puts all right, and we've run that. What? Okay. Line 19 in the. All right, maybe that didn't work. For some reason, I'll look that up and get back to you. I'm going to just delete this for now. All right, so instead of braces, we want to use do and end around that. We also have things that we don't have in JavaScript. Okay, so in JavaScript, how would you create an array or of the numbers 1 to a million? 1, 2, no. You'd have to create a programmatic way of doing that. And it would be a few lines of code. Well, we have something nicer in Ruby that allows us to do that. We just say 1, 10. It's the range. So we have a range 1 to 10, and we'd say dot h2 Stop emailing me. There we go. So we've got by 10 times in a row there. So that's pretty fun. If we want to intercept it, we can even put in.
I think it's only 9 times, right? Because isn't it 2 dots if you want?
1, 2, 3. You're right. You're right. There's the 2 dots and the 3 dots. So let's actually check that out. So if I've got the 3 dots, it's so say puts NUM. So let's do this. No, not that. Right, so 1 to 9 is the 3 dots. And then if I do 2 dots, it's 1 to 10. You are correct, sir. It's one of those things that I knew and forgot, but now I know it again. All right, random numbers. You remember math dot or math dot random, and then yeah, that was crap. Again, Ruby loves us a little better. We have this random method, and we can just put a range there, and it'll just choose something at random from that range and return it to us. We also have the times method. So and run that. There we go. So there's a few things we don't have in JavaScript that we do have in Ruby that are there to make our lives a little easier. The people who did do Ruby realize that choosing random numbers is something we do actually quite often. One of the major advantages that Ruby has over JavaScript is that it's not tied to the browser. And what that means is they never have to worry about backwards compatibility. So Ruby's had 3 major releases, version 1, version 2, and very recently version 3. I believe we're going to be doing most of our work on version 2, which is fine. But there are breaking changes between each of those versions. So it's something you write in Ruby 3 or 2 is not guaranteed to be backwards compatible with Ruby 1. If you write a JavaScript program and run it through an old machine, it will still run. You might not have everything happen. You might get a lot of errors, but it will still run. It won't crash. And that's a big advantage that we have when we are using Ruby. All right. The best programming language to come out of Japan. The only programming language that I know that came out of Japan. All right. Are there any questions about the content so far?
What's the benefit of breaking changes though?
So it means that you can make a new version and people can write software for that version to take advantage of the new changes. It's not that they're trying to break it, it's just that it doesn't matter if they break it, right? Because if
Right, so they can write better updates and stuff.
absolutely. So they're going to write the best code as opposed to what JavaScript has to do and has to think, okay, how do we make it backwards compatible to every single JavaScript compiler that has been written since 1995?
Right.
Is it going to be run on an older machine? Probably not, but that is sort of the guarantee or the promise you've been given when you're using JavaScript. All right, it's 5:02. Let's take a 15-minute break because I need a 15-minute break. And maybe you do too, because I've been talking a lot. So let's come back at 10 after. All right, everyone, super. Thanks a lot. Hey, Todd.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Going all right.
Good.
I am always so tired after teaching.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it takes a lot out of you for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah. Having to be on like that in front of a group is tiring.
Yeah, it's weird because I never thought of myself as a public speaker, but I guess I am. I guess
Yeah,
this is what I
yeah.
do for a living now.
That's right. How's your new computer?
It's sweet.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I dropped almost $5,000 on it.
Yeah, you were saying it must be souped up.
Yes, it's got a lot like a lot of RAM, a lot of power.
Yeah. One of the new M1.
Oh
processors.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's pretty fast.
Yeah. Nice. What's your color theme on VS Code? I'm always interested.
Oh, this is called Nord City.
Nord City, yeah.
Yeah, where is it? So I like Nord, but Nord doesn't have, Nord City, here we go.
Oh, okay.
But Nord has like the light gray there, or the
Yeah.
bluish gray, and I prefer the black background. So
Okay.
Nord City is the way to go.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Hopefully easy to read. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back, both of the students who showed up on time. I'm sure there's more than two of you. Okay, great. So let's go on. So variables, conditionals, and loops. So what else do we need to talk about? We need to talk about methods. So because everything in Ruby is a class, that means everything we run is a method being a function that lives on a class. So let's do that. So I'm going to methods.rb. Okay. So methods are easy to create. Just use the keyword def as opposed to function. Def, and we'll say we'll create a say hello. Hello. Now I could put in a name here inside parens, or I can leave it out of parens. You're going to see this both ways. I prefer with parens, but then again, I also code with JavaScript most of the time. So not name error. All right. And we don't need to have curlies. Instead, we'll just put all right. And of course, I have to put the end keyword at the bottom. Okay, and when I run this, nothing happens. Why did nothing happen?
We didn't call the function.
You got it. You got it. Point for Jang. Okay, so let's call the function. Call the function the same way we do it in JavaScript. So let's say hello, and once again, optional. So there we go. There. So we've now created a function. Something else about def. by. And we'll say first underscore name, then second underscore name. And we'll do puts. Oh, all right. And we put an end here. And we'll say by. So remember where in JavaScript you could put as many variables as you want in a function, but you don't have to send them all in. It'll still work as long as it only needs the one. You must always pass in to Ruby the same number of parameters as you have, or arguments as you have parameters. There we go. I always get those two mixed up. So let's say goodbye to John. And I have to put a comma between those two. And I have to put a comma between those two. Great. So let's run that. There. So if I try to do that without Parson, I crash. And this is what a crash in Ruby looks like. So you always get a trace back. So I need to pass in my second parameter in order for it to work. All right. So return values. Excellent point. So what are the return values from functions? Because, or methods, because they're very similar to functions in JavaScript. So we can actually do it the same way. We could say def double num num. Thank you for being helpful. And then we could say okay. However, we don't, in Ruby, the last value that is evident in a function is returned. So you don't actually need to use the return keyword, but the last value that is present in a function will get returned. So I could show you this by doing there we go. So I get my value out of it. So I don't need to use the return keyword. However, it doesn't hurt if I do.
So John, so say on the function say by, puts is a side effect, right?
Yes.
Does that return undefined or nil, or like does it return anything?
Well, let's find out. Let's do a puts. And oh wait, let's error it. Okay, so it returns nothing. It crashes the entire app. So here, say by wrong number of arguments given when expected to. It's a nice error. It tells me exactly what's wrong with it. But we do need to make sure that, so it's not going to return undefined. It's going to crash your program. JavaScript, a little nicer, undefined. Now, you have to deal with that undefined, but at least your app doesn't crash. Right. That's the major points about methods that I want to bring up. Let me just have a look at my cheat sheet. Oh, this is a good one. So if I have a num, and I'm going to create a variable num, I'm going to create a method change num, and just change num. I can then put num equals 10 here. So let's see what happens when I do puts num. Okay, right, and because those are both the same number, aren't they? Let's change that. So I get 10, which is what I expect. We're going to run change num. So I can, it's always good to know that you're running something. I like to put, but again, this is optional. You don't have to put the parens there. So let's try this, puts. All right, who says it, line 30 is going to output 30? Well, 30, 30, there we go. Unintentional, but amusing nonetheless. Who votes for 10 and who votes for 30? Well, let's find out. And that is because inside a block, it doesn't have access to variables outside of that block. If you want to do an operation on a value, you must pass it in to the function. So even though I said change num to 30 and I ran change num, it did change the num to 30, but num is still equal to 10 because num is only equal to 30 inside this block. That makes sense?
Would you say that the num on line 23 is a different num than
Yes.
the line num on, yeah? On
It
line
is.
20?
It is absolutely a different num. So you can't easily transfer variables. Again, if you want to do something on a variable, you must pass it in to your function or to your method. Okay. Awesome. Any questions about methods? Awesome. So let's continue on with our journey. The next thing I'm going to talk about is hashes. So what's a hash, I hear you ask? Or, I assume you would ask me if, we were to get in the same place. And that is, a hash is actually very much like an object in JavaScript. However, it's it's got some differences. For instance, a hash does not, you can't add a method to a hash easily. That's not what a hash is for. It's just for assigning values to keys. So it's just key value pairs inside the hash. Okay, so let's create a hash. And there's actually a few ways to do this. I kind of like this. So I'm going to create a user, and we're going to create it with user name. Except that I'm doing it the JavaScript way. I got to do it the Ruby way, which is a fat arrow. And then comma, so I have a user, and if I actually come down here, I could say puts user. Let's see what comes out of that. So it's returning the representation. So this, by the way, in Ruby, instead of being called a fat arrow, and just because I'm using ligatures in my font, it's actually that without a space between them. Okay, so that's what that is. So this is called a hash rocket in Ruby. I think it's silly, but hey, what do I know? I do JavaScript most of the time. Okay, so how do we extract values from hash? I can't do user dot age. I can't put because that is actually a method. If you're using dot something, it's going to be a method. So this isn't going to work. There we go. Undefined method age. So luckily, though, you may remember, and this is very similar to one of the ways we can get the information out of an object in JavaScript. So if you want to get that information out of an object, then you need to use this bracket notation. Okay, so this is cool, but the thing about strings is they're actually quite, there's quite a lot of baggage associated with it. One of the drawbacks of having everything an object is that everything has a lot of stuff attached to it. So let me just go into IRB and I'll show you. So I'm just going to create a string equals John. Okay. And a really handy method to know, it is methods. So all of these are methods I can run on my string. My string is an object, and the object has all of this attached to it. That's a lot. And most people don't even know what like a third of these do. And don't worry about it. You're not going to have to remember every single one of these. So instead of doing that, we have this concept of symbols. And what a symbol is it's sort of like a string, but without the baggage. And let me show you how it works. So say user. Now I'm still going to use John on this side because that's what that's the information that I want in there. And I could put in thanks, Dad. So we can create this better user. And you'll notice, what, oh, right, it's not that. Again, I've been spending too much time in JavaScript, so you still have to use the hash brackets here. There we go, perfect. So you'll notice that rather than having a string as the title for a value, I now have a symbol. Symbol doesn't have the baggage, and that's because a symbol sort of lives off of a symbol object, a global symbol object. So IRB symbol dot all, I want to say. No, not all. Hold on. I knew this at one point. Oh, symbol dot all symbols. And there we go. So these are the symbols that already exist in Ruby by default. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. So I can want to do a dot size, I want to say. Yeah, 4,665 of them. Only one, two of which are the symbols that I created. Username and eyebrows. Okay, so that's a better way to create an object, but it's still a little bit super annoying to do it that way. Luckily, the people who run Ruby, who still, by as far as I know, Matt's, he came up with this great idea, super original. And we can do command not found puts. What up a dot? What did I do? What did I do?
You typed puts instead of Ruby.
Ah, yes. That would make sense. And there we go. So, oh, expecting end of input. Okay, no, this is great because it's telling me I have an error. Expecting line 19. Okay, I forgot to put in my. There we go. So you'll notice that username here is still a symbol, but this is just a different syntax people are more familiar with. Most people who write Ruby on Rails, and most people who write Ruby on Rails are web developers who also have to know JavaScript. So it's better to just have one way of creating a hash or an object. Sometimes it's called a dictionary. All right, something else I want to show you quickly is arrays. So I've shown you an array already. Let's make it of strings. So this should look familiar. There is also another way of creating, just run that, there we go, 1, 2, 3. There's also another way of doing this, and we'll call it modern array equals, and this is a little bit weird. Notice that I am not putting in any quotes. I'm not putting any commas between them. However, it still works. They're still strings. However, this is, you'll see this in more modern Ruby on Rails applications, people using this syntax. I find this is less complicated, but I don't know, sometimes I don't want to reach for my quote key. So this is quite nice. Note that if you use %W, all of these must be strings, because that's what we're saying. Everything I'm passing to you now is a string. So it deals away with all the extra baggage that it needs to deal with. Okay, so that's hashes and a little bit of arrays. We're getting close to the end, my friends. 2 more. The next one is blocks and lambdas. Whoa, lambdas. Yeah, so it's a little bit interesting. Lambdas are kind of a little bit to get used to. They're not that difficult though. So let's create here an array. Here, we'll create a students equals, ooh, let's use the new syntax. No. You deserve to be capitalized. And yet I still didn't do it. All right, there we go. So I've got my array. All right, so we know how to go through that array and print out all of the names. Somebody want to take a crack at it? How would you go through this array and just output each name one by one?
students dot each do pipe student, another pipe.
Yeah.
And then next line would be put student and then end.
I cannot spell student to save my life. So this is puts student and then end. Okay, let's have a look and see if that works. Yep, absolutely, it works. So that's great. But we can actually do it in a slightly different way, and that is by using what we call a lambda. So let me create my lambda. A lambda is like anything else, so I have to give it a name. So I'm going to say my lambda. Lambda being one of the letters in the Greek alphabet. And if you're a Half-Life fan, you'll know what that is too. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, get off my lawn, you kids. Okay, so my lambda equals, so I'm going to use the lambda keyword. And then I do this. And so a lambda basically is, you can think of it as part of a function. So I'm going to say a lambda is going to take an item. And then it is going to return that item, or it's going to puts. Okay. And the way I use it is, I would say, students dot each. And I call a lambda by using the ampersand. You thought you were using all of the characters on your keyboard, but we use the ampersand and we say my lambda. And students come back a second time. So don't fret too much about this. It's a little bit weird, like, isn't that a method, John? Well, it's part of a method. We can use it in place of a method, or we can put this bit of logic into several different methods. So say we have a loop that we want to do in 3 different places. We can create a lambda to do that and just bring that in when we need that loop. So when you see this ampersand, it's a lambda. There's also another syntax. And this is also weird. This is just dash arrow and then the same thing here. It's actually I think this is a thing. Let's run it on students and see if it works. What did I do? What did I do? Unexpected. Oh, all right. Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember this. Hold on, let me look it up. So let me just pull over a So lambdas, Ruby doc, there we go. I'm already here. So let's just put lambda. What are you doing? Why are you sending me here? Class proc, there we go. And then lambda. Right, so these are all the methods, and proc is sort of a lambda, but let me just here. I found it elsewhere here. So Ruby and syntax. Hey, it's as if I've been to this page before. It's purple. Okay, so we've got the lambda yield means we can put information in there. It's kind of interesting. I'll pop this link into the notes, but if I look for, there we go. Here's the puts. So this is a lambda, and let's put X. Okay, interesting. So let's figure out how we're going to do this. Do I need to put it all in one line? Or maybe I need to use a proc. Let's try it both ways. Okay, so I'm going to go over to, I have too many programs running. Okay, so first I am going to.
Hey, John, I think the method is called dot upcase.
Oh, all right. Maybe that's it. Maybe my lambda's fine.
It's just upcase, all one word. There's no to and there's no underscore.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, no, there's still a problem with the lambda though. So a lambda is a type of proc, and I know I'm using a lot of different new words here. And expecting, do, or. It's not complaining about that space, is it? No. Okay, so let's say, all right, I am not going to worry about it because I can just do that. And then I can run it like this and not worry about that. And I'll look into what I am doing wrong here. I made it all the way to number 6 before I got stuck. I'm pretty impressed. There we go. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out and I will pop it in the notes. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, calm my shattered nerves.
So John, so lambdas are they like a way to separate logic?
Yes, absolutely. That's what
Like even
lambdas are.
finer grained than a function.
Yes, you can use
Okay.
a lambda in multiple functions or methods. And if you need the same logic.
Do you need to pass them anything? Like
not
a function?
necessarily. So if we come back here, if we come back here, you can see that we're calling it, right? So that's what I have to do. So we've got this lambda, and you can call it in any of these manners. So that's why I was not working. Let's try that again. And oh, I don't have to start it with an and. There we go. Or do I? Da, 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 da. Interesting. Here. When in doubt, copy and paste. Oh, here, let's go to raw. There we go. I'm not sure how this differs from what I had, but oh, right, because I didn't pass it an item. All right, that's why it didn't work. So this is a lambda, and actually, if we come over here, lambda is a way to define a block. So everything, every time you see that indentation, that's a block inside Ruby. So blocks are important. It's sort of like scope in JavaScript. So this indentation right here is considered inside the block, everything between the do and the end.
The indentation isn't important. Like in Python, it's important to indent, but not here,
Yeah.
is it?
No, it's not important.
Just the do
However,
in the end.
you really want to make sure that you're using your indentation properly because it helps with legibility.
Right,
lot.
right, right. Thanks.
Yep, no worries. Okay, awesome. And that leads me to, oh my gosh, it's 10:02. All right, I'm going to do a very fast classes. So a class is, in JavaScript, you can think of a class as an object factory. So you use a class to create an object. So here in Ruby, 7 dash. Okay, so you're going to see this a lot in Rails. So we create a class with a keyword class, and here I'm just going to use shape, and then I'm going to put end there. So that is a class. So if I, at the end of this, if I say circle equals shape.new, and I run that. And then we circle. There. So you'll notice that get this weird looking thing. And this weird looking thing is an object. We've created an object. This is sort of the ID of the object. But you can see that this is an object. If I create a second object, it will get a different ID. Okay, but this is an object that's the same as every other object. So what we need to do is instantiate the object. And we can do that by using a special method called initialize. And into initialize, you are going to pass in the parameters that you want. So let's put in a size. Okay, and then we need to assign the size. So actually, let's do it this way. Size equals size. What this is a instance variable, which means that when I create a shape, it is going to have a variable called size. All right, so let's run this again. And expecting end, what did I miss? Size equals size. Right. So there's a problem, and that is that my circle, I didn't pass in the size. So let's call this size, I don't know, 25. There. So now that works. However, you may notice that I don't have access to that. How would I get access to it? So circle dot size isn't going to work because dot size is a method. And this should crash on me. There we go. Size is not a method. So what we need to do is we need to create a method that allows us to access that variable. And we can do that a couple of different ways. We can actually create the size method. We could say, please return the size instance variable. And yep, so now I can actually run circle.size. And I get back my 25. So I can't get that 25 until I create a method that allows me to access it. So this is called an accessor. So, however, I can't change the size because this method here doesn't take any parameters. So how would I change the size? So what I would need to do, and don't worry too much about this, size equals I could say and then I can end here. Oh, sorry, and that should be an equals. Okay, so now let's create circle dot size equals 50. Circle dot size. And if I run this, you can see that now I have the ability to change it because I've created a way to, and you can think of this as a getter and a setter. So I've got a getter function and a setter function. However, there's an awful lot of duplication here. And luckily for us, our good friends have realized that that is silly and have created different ways. So if you want to create just a reader or a getter, you just have to use attr reader. And then we can put in size. And so it should crash on the second one. Yeah, but 25 comes back because now I've got the accessor, and I can also create a writer with attr underscore writer. Size, I can spell. And once again, we can go back to being able to change the size. There's also an even better way if you want to be able to access and change it. and that is attr accessor and this should still work. So this is the way we create different objects. Ruby is object oriented, so everything is an object. And we have to have a way to create our own objects, and this is the way with the class keyword. Okay. Any questions? I know I went through the last bit very quickly, but I didn't want to eat into the rest of your day. Okay, well, if there are no questions, or you decide you have a question later, feel free to Slack me and I'd be happy to answer it. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. You amazing human beings.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.